Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our channel. It is Monday, the 18th of May, 2026. We are on our 75th Tawheed Halaqah. We are on volume 4, second part of the volume, page 231, chapter 3, chapter title, Standing with Humility and Silence is Not by Default Worship. So, starting with the text. This applies to prostration, bowing, and bending. As for standing, it is known that there are 3 types of standing for creatures: standing towards someone, standing for someone, and standing over someone. The first type is permissible. It is the standing done for the purpose of greeting, showing respect, embracing, welcoming someone who has arrived, and similar manners. Numerous authentic transmitted texts that provide certain knowledge, whose combined evidence leads to certainty, indicate that the Prophet ﷺ used to do this for some of his companions and relatives, and that some of the companions, may Allah be pleased with them, used to do it for one another. Examples of this include, as per the hadith, which is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim upon the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Prophet ﷺ said to the Ansar at Banu Qurayza when Sa'd ibn Mu'adh came, "Stand up for your Sayyid." Also cited in the Sahihain, appearing in the long hadith narrated by Ka'b ibn Malik regarding the story of the three who were left behind, about the action of Talha ibn Ubaidullah, who stood up to congratulate him after Allah turned him to him in repentance. This happened in the assembly of the Prophet and in his presence, without any objection being raised. Ka'b would constantly recall that incident to Talha, may Allah be pleased with them both. In his collection of Sunan at-Tirmidhi, narrated a tradition upon the authority of Aisha radiallahu anha, with that the Prophet ﷺ stood to embrace Zayd ibn Haritha. Elsewhere in the Sunan, collections of Tirmidhi, Al-Nisa'i, and Abu Dawud, it is further narrated that the Prophet ﷺ stood up for Fatima whenever she came to visit. She also reciprocated this when he visited her. Lastly, one can consider also the narration recorded by Al-Bayhaqi regarding the Prophet ﷺ standing up for Ikramah ibn Abi Jahl when he migrated to him, among other narrations which are mutawatir manawiyan, continuous recurrent narrations by meaning, thereby indicating decisiveness and certainty. As for the remaining types of standing, namely standing for someone and standing over someone, they are either haram or makruh, disliked, according to a difference of opinion among the jurists. This type of standing is done out of veneration, not with the intention of greeting or anything of that sort. It is of 2 forms: standing over a man while he is sitting, or as done by the king's attendants out of veneration, without any other reason justifying this act. As for the guards, the police, etc., whose job or security roles require them to perform it while standing, then there shall be no blame upon them, for in this case standing is to perform a job that cannot be properly performed except while standing, meaning it is a necessary condition for them to appropriately execute their responsibilities. This is called standing over someone, which is most likely haram. As for standing for someone who enters or passes by out of veneration without shaking hands, embracing, or greeting them, it is most likely not forbidden, and it is called standing for someone. Just a second. I'm not sure if there's a time. As for the guards, the police, whose job requires them to perform, there's no blame upon them. For in this case, standing is to perform a job that cannot be properly performed except while standing, meaning it is a necessary condition for them to appropriately execute their responsibilities. This is called standing over someone, which is most likely haram. I think that might be a mistaken, because this indicates that it's not haram according to your text. Standing over someone. If you heard me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's saying here, I think the translator may have messed this up. So as for the police whose job or security requires them to perform it while standing, then there shall be no blame upon them, for in this case standing is to perform a job that cannot be properly performed except while standing, meaning it is a necessary condition for them to appropriately execute their responsibilities. This is called standing over someone, and that they've translated, which is most likely haram. So it
Okay.
seems the opposite. Do you think that's
Mm.
so that's the typo, yeah?
Oh, that's yeah. It's most likely there's no reason regarding or something like that. It's most either disliked or haram.
Hold on,
Like
hold on, hold on. You've just said, as for the police, whose job requires them to perform the role while standing.
that's okay. That's not a problem. Those who are for standing over, which has no other justification, just standing for respect and so on. That's most likely haram, disliked.
Okay, so they need to clarify in the text, except other than that would
Yeah,
be considered
yeah.
than that.
But the meaning is clear. If the performing of the function of guarding, I think zakat is not requiring this. Otherwise, it's just standing for respect, like kings and so on. People standing there in their presence because they are kings, not because they're performing a guarding function and so on.
Mhm,
That's disliked or haram. Different point of views from fiqh point of view.
mhm. Based on
Anyway,
certain us.
neither has anything to do with shirk or anything like that.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And the
Yeah.
reason you're mentioning it is because they associate that with shirk,
Yeah.
standing for before a flag,
For
etc., etc.
banner or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. As for standing for someone who enters or passes or passes or by, as for standing for someone who enters or passes by out of veneration without shaking hands, embracing or greeting them, it is most likely not forbidden and it is called standing for someone. As for these two types, the texts have come prohibiting them. As for someone who enters or passes by out of veneration without shaking hands, embracing, or greeting them, it is most likely not forbidden, and it is called standing for someone. As for these two types, the texts have come prohibited them and informing them that they resemble the practice of the non-Muslims in the veneration of others besides Allah, as citing the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So this is badly worded, or at least it sounds a bit ambiguous. It probably needs to be retranslated
Mhm.
because it says it seems to be internally contradictory because you said it's not most likely haram, then it says if it's standing for someone there's two is most likely not forbidden. I don't know, it just needs I think it needs to be so I think your clarification there probably needs to be incorporated into it.
Mhm.
As cited in Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abu Kamil narrated to us, Hamad Murrah narrated to us from Thabit from Anas and Murrah from Humayd from Anas ibn Malik. He said, none was more beloved to them than the Messenger of Allah. Sallallahu Yet when they saw him, none of them would stand up for him because they knew he hated that.
Mhm.
It is also narrated in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Humayd with a Sahih Isnad. Abu Osama reported to us from Habib ibn Shahid from Abu Bijlaz Lahiq ibn Humayd. He said Muawiyah entered the house in which Abdullah ibn Amr and Abdullah ibn Zubair were. Abdullah ibn Amr stood up, whereas Abdullah ibn Zubair didn't. Muawiyah said to Abdullah ibn Amr, sit, for I heard the Messenger of Allah saying, let him who likes people to stand up before him prepare his place in the fire. Further to this is that's a narration from Muawiyah, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Further to this, cited from a second pathway of reporting, At-Tabarani has recorded the following Mujam al-Awsat. Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qudai al-Ashwazi narrated to us, he said, Abdullah ibn Dawood ibn Dhalat Dalhat narrated to us. He said, my father narrated to me from his father, Dalhat from his father, Ismail from his father, that his father, Misra ibn Yasar narrated to me it from Amr ibn Murrah al-Juhani. He said, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever loves for men to stand before him, let him take his seat in the fire. Contained here, there is a warning. There is a warning. It is only for the one who loves that people stand for him. A person's love for others to stand for him is without a doubt prohibited. This ultimately stems from arrogance and self-conceit, and it is one of the destructive diseases of the heart. The infallible and final prophet, sallallahu peace be upon him and his family, was the father of people from such noxious behavior. Hence, that is why his noble companions, may Allah be pleased with them, narrated from standing up for him, even though he never explicitly refrained from standing up for him, even though he never explicitly forbade them from doing so, unless it was an imitation of the non-Arabs. Next, the following is cited in Musnad of Imam Ahmad. So, do you take that narration from Muawiyah?
Yeah, because it's secondary. It's not. He claims this, and
You've got to separate.
most likely he wants to show off that he knows that and so on. To Abdullah ibn Zubair, Abdullah ibn Amr. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you have another narration anyway from a different.
Yeah, it's another one anyway. Mm-hmm.
The next narration from Musnad Imam Ahmad. Ibn
Mm-hmm.
Numayr narrated to us. Mis'ar narrated to us from Abu Anbas, from Abu Ad-Dabbas, from Abu Madruk, from Abu Ghalib, from Abu Osama. He said, the Messenger of Allah SAW came out to us leaning upon a staff. So we stood for him. He said, do not stand up as foreigners do for showing respect to one another. Then it was as if we wished he would supplicate for us. So he said, O Allah, forgive us, have mercy on us, be pleased with us, accept from us, admit us into paradise, save us from the fire, and set right all our affairs. Then it was as if we wished he would ask for even more. So he said, I have encompassed for you everything in this. While the isnad for this may not be particularly strong, this reported text is upstanding. Like the previous narration, there is no mention or discussion of matters pertaining to shirk or kufr. Rather, it is limited to that of a dislike of imitating foreigners only. As per the Sahih Hadith, which is narrated by Imam Muslim in his collection of Sahih, namely, Qutayba ibn Sa'id narrated to us, Layth narrated to us, Hawala and Muhammad ibn Rumh narrated to us, Layth reported to us from Abu Zubair from Jabir. He said the Messenger of Allah sallam, was ill, and we said the prayer behind him as he was sitting. Abu Bakr was making audible to the people his takbir. As he paid his attention towards us, he saw us standing and directed us to sit down with a gesture. So we sat down and said our prayers with his prayer in a sitting posture. After uttering salutations, he said, you are at this time about to do an act like that of the Persians and the Romans. They stand before their kings while they sit, and so do not do that. So don't do that. Follow your imams. If they say prayer standing, you should do so. And if they say it sitting, you should also do so. Nothing within this previous paragraph contains any mention of shirk or kufr. Rather, it is a dislike or imitating of the Persians and Romans in that specific act, and nothing more. Accordingly, it is understood that standing for for a created being carries a severe warning only for those who love that to be done for them.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, it is considered a form of imitating the disbelievers, imitating the disbelievers and adopting from their practices that are unique to their disbelief or mark them as disbelievers. Imitating the disbelievers and adopting from their practices those that are unique to their disbelief or mark them as disbelievers has come with a severe warning. It was narrated by Ahmad and Abu Dawood upon the authority of Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever imitates a people is one of them. Also narrated by At-Tirmidhi upon the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, that the Prophet ﷺ said, he is not one of us who imitates others. Do not imitate the Jews or Christians, or the Christians. There are the other explicit or implicit authentic texts related to the same topic. The Prophet ﷺ did not call these two disliked or prohibited types of standing ibadah, nor did he assume that this act is considered shirk. The Prophet did not say, you have made me a Lord or a God, nor did he say that you have worshipped me besides Allah, or that you have set me up as a rival to Allah, or anything similar to that, or even close to it, or a statement similar in judgment, taking into consideration that he prohibited from these two acts, as we have discussed in detail. Notwithstanding the above, it is essential to recognize that the Islamic prayer is, in contrast, a ritual of worship, and that standing during it is ibadah, which remains so under all circumstances, even if it is not performed as it should be, namely with total humility and complete devotion. However, it is ibadah in all cases, including the bowing and prostration that it contains. And what we have mentioned in this chapter regarding standing with humility and stillness in a specific manner, and what we have mentioned in a previous chapter regarding prostration, applies all the more to bowing, bending, and greeting through lowering the head and placing the hands on the chest and other bodily postures similar to that. None of these bodily postures in and of itself qualify as acts of ibadah in the first place. Therefore, we shall not elaborate on it or attempt to prove it. So, any comment on there? Any context behind this chapter?
Maybe need to edit it and rearranged a little bit. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But generally, the purpose of this was to debunk the
Wahhabi point of view. That's standing still in front of the banner and things like that is shirk and things like that.
Mhm. So if any of this would have been shirk, would have been mentioned, would have been explicitly mentioned, which is another concession of ignorance of their point of view. Okay, moving on to the next chapter, which is chapter 4, page 237, title Other Hadith on Standing, Not Seeking Help. Following on from the discussion in the previous chapter regarding standing being a matter intrinsic as an act of worship, there is a particular hadith that is of note to discuss. While it may not in and of itself be construed as being definitive proof, this is due to the presence of a mubham narrator in the channel of transmission. It does provide some supporting corroborative evidence to the arguments that we have been setting out. So just an explanation, we have left the technical term mubham, plural mubhamat, as a transliteration. It refers to ambiguity over the identity and name of a given narrator. Yeah, so it's just a bit more definite discussion in the footnote there if you want to follow it up. Okay, while it does provide some corroborative evidence. Okay, so naturally it provides a stern slap to the bizarre claims asserted by the Wahhabi sect, and this has been included here, albeit as a separate chapter, but can be taken as a corollary or appendix to the previous one. The narrations in question. The first is cited in Tafsir of Ibn Abi Hatim. It was mentioned on the authority of Zayd ibn al-Hubab ibn Lahiya, narrated to us, al-Harith ibn Zayd al-Hadrami, from Ali ibn Rabah al-Lakhmi, someone who witnessed Ubadah ibn Samit, narrated to me, saying, we were in the mosque, and among us was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, may Allah be pleased with him, and some of us were reciting the Quran to one another. Then Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul came, carrying a cushion and a mat, placed them down and reclined. He was eloquent, articulate, and argumentative. He said, O Abu Bakr, tell Muhammad to bring us a verse like those brought by the earlier prophets. Moses came with the tablets, David came with the Psalms, Salih came with the she-camel, and Jesus came with the gospel and the table from heaven. Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, wept. Then the Messenger of Allah ﷺ came out, and Abu Bakr said, rise for the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, so we may seek refuge with him from this munafiq. The Prophet ﷺ said, people should not stand up for me, they should only stand for Allah, the Almighty and Sublime. So we replied, O Messenger of Allah, we have been troubled by this munafiq. In reply, he said, indeed, the angel Jibreel said to me, go forth and proclaim the favors of Allah that he has bestowed upon you and the excellence with which he has favored you. He gave me glad tidings that I have been sent to all mankind. To the red and the black, he commanded me to warn the jinn, granted me his book while I was unlettered, forgave my past and future sins, and mentioned my name in the Adhan. He supported me with angels, granted me victory, placed fear of me in the hearts of my enemies, gave me al-Qawthar, and made my Hawd the greatest of all on the day of judgment. He promised me the Maqam al-Mahmud, while people will be rushing with their heads bowed. He placed me among the first group to emerge from mankind and included 70,000 of my followers in my intercession, admitting them into paradise without reckoning. He granted me authority and dominion, elevating me to the highest chamber in the gardens of paradise, and none above me except the angels who carry the throne. He made the spoils of war lawful to me, though they were not lawful for anyone before me. It is also set out in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, beginning with the wording, Ibn Abi Hatim, may Allah be pleased with him, said, after which Ibn Kathir commented by saying, this hadith is gharib jiddan, strange, extremely strange. After citing this, Imam Ibn Kathir said, it has been narrated by Ahmad ibn Ali from a man from Ubadah, as well as will be mentioned in the matter of mubhamat from him. It is missing from the manuscripts that are currently in circulation today. It is also cited in Tafsir al-Quran min al-Jami of Ibn Wahab. The original is from a poor quality manuscript. The isnad is present as having a series of blanks. Then an from Ibn Lahiya, from Al-Harith ibn Yazid, from Ali ibn Rabbah, from a man who heard Ubadah ibn as-Samit. We used to gather in the mosque to recite the Quran, and among us was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, etc. Essentially, the reported wording is largely the same as the previous narration, including mention of the entry of Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul and his obnoxious comments. Another core aspect of the narration has the wording purportedly from Abu Bakr, where he says, "Let us rise and seek refuge with the Prophet of Allah from this munafiq," and the prophetic reply set out as being, "No one stands for me, they stand only for Allah. Indeed, Jibreel came to me and said, Go forth and proclaim the favor of Allah that He has bestowed upon you and the distinction He has granted you." A brief mention of the narration appears in the Musnad of Ahmad, essentially carrying the narration in the abbreviated form. Musa ibn Dawood narrated to us, Ibn Lahiya narrated to us from Al-Harith ibn Yazid, from Ali ibn Rabbah, that a man heard Ubadah ibn as-Samit saying, "The Messenger of Allah sallam, came out to us, and Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, said, Let us stand to seek help from the Messenger of Allah sallam, against this munafiq." The Messenger of Allah sallam then said, "Do not stand for me. Indeed, standing is only for Allah, the Blessed and Almighty." These are three trustworthy narrators, the first being Imam Abdullah ibn Wahhab. He is considered the most reliable narration from Ibn Lahiya, highly accurate in hadith transmission, and also among those who are the earliest to hear from him, being in possession of his original manuscripts. Next is Zayd ibn Hubab, again being among those who heard from Ibn Lahiya in the early period, and lastly Musa ibn Dawood, all of them reporting the purported prophetic wording as being, "Do not stand for me, indeed standing is only for Allah, the Blessed and Almighty." All these narrators have attributed this to a mubham narrator from Ubadah ibn as-Samit. However, there is also the attribution that is reported by At-Tabarani, as we find this cited in Jami al-Masanid wal-Sunan by Ibn Kathir. He records, At-Tabarani said, Ahmad ibn Hamad ibn Zuhba al-Misri narrated to us, Sa'id ibn Ufair narrated to us, Ibn Lahiya narrated to us from Al-Harith ibn Yazid, from Ali ibn Rabbah, from Ubadah. He said, Abu Bakr said, "Stand up and seek help from the Messenger of Allah sallam, against this hypocrite." The Messenger of Allah sallam said, "I'm not the one to be sought for help, but rather is to be sought from Allah, the Mighty and Sublime." Again, here Imam Ibn Kathir commented with, "It has been narrated by Ahmad ibn Ali from a man from Ubadah, as well as mentioned in the matter of Mubahamat from him. It is missing from the manuscripts that are currently in circulation today." Al-Haythami makes mention of this in Mujam al-Zawaid, beginning with, "And from Ubadah ibn as-Samit." He said the purported prophetic wording, though, is different and is expressed as, "Indeed, help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah, the Mighty and Sublime." After mentioning this, Al-Haythami said, "It is narrated by At-Tabarani, its men in the channel of transmission are the men of Sahih, other than Ibn Lahiya. It is a Hasan hadith, and it has been narrated by Imam Ahmad in a different context concerning mannerisms in the chapter related to standing. In response, we would argue that decisively this is batil without a shadow of a doubt. It would be difficult to argue that this is a typographical error made by the scribe in dictation, given that there is a clear disparity in the reporting wording from yuqamu to yastaghathu. Responsibility for that error would seem to reside with either Ahmad ibn Hamad ibn Zughba al-Misri or Sa'id ibn Kathir ibn Ufayr. The latter perhaps more likely, given that he would read the books of people as per Tariq al-Islam. Concerning the writing, as per the latter narrations from Ibn Lahiya, they are not considered reliable, containing a great deal of confusion. Again, as noted in Tariq al-Islam, Ibn Yunus said in another place, this hadith is among those which were criticized regarding the presence of Sa'id ibn Hufayr. No one narrated from Ibn Lahiya Nahiya bar him. Similarly, another hadith he narrated from Ibn Nahiya was also subject to criticism. Given this, given this, I would also argue that by Allah, there is no God besides him. The seal of the Prophet ﷺ never once said, "Indeed, help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah." Such a phrase wasn't sent down to him, neither in the night or the day. Catastrophically, this Batil hadith suited the inclination of Ibn Taymiyyah, matching his innovation. He thus relied upon it and spread it as it has been mentioned in Jami' al-Rasail of Ibn Taymiyyah. Before I proceed, Sheikh, what is your contention here? Help is not sought for me, rather it's sought from Allah. Is that where you're debunking that aspect of the narration?
Yeah, the narration generally because of the Mubham man, but also specifically that all other narrations do not mention this phrase, mention another phrase.
Okay.
Stand for instead of asking help from.
Okay, but seeking help from, is this so it's istighatha, it's supposed to yuqamu.
Isti'ana, yeah.
So istighatha, I mean,
Istighatha and you stand. The writing in Arabic is similar. Maybe it's tasheef. Maybe it's a misrepresentation, I think.
So the point, but the thing is this because is this reinforcing their point of view related to istighatha then?
Yeah, that's it. So that's but Ibn Taymiyyah invoked that. Although the hadith is almost certainly about it, generally, with both wording anyway, because there's an unknown man there. But independent of that, most narrations do not use istighatha. They're standing for.
So if istighatha's permissibility or not would be have to be established elsewhere then?
On other, yeah.
So this is from Jami' al-Rasail of Ibn Taymiyyah. The one who requests dua from another falls into two categories. First, that his request arises from a need for the other. This is analogous to seeking from others the fulfillment of personal needs. Second, that he seeks from the other a supplication whereby the supplicator benefits the requester by his dua, and Allah benefits both thereby. This is like requesting from a created being that which the created being is capable of doing, such as supplicating Allah or offering assistance. Such a request is permissible, akin to seeking help in that which lies within his power. However, if what is sought is that which no one has power over save Allah, then it is impermissible to ask for it from any other than Allah, neither from angels nor the prophets, nor from anyone else. Hence, it isn't lawful to say to any other than Allah, forgive me or send us rain, or the like thereof. For this reason, At-Tabarani narrated in his Mujam that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a hypocrite who used to harm the believers. So As-Siddiq, Abu Bakr said, "Come, let us seek the Prophet's help against this hypocrite." So they went to him, and he said, "Indeed, help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah. Inna la yastaghatha ni innama yastaghatha billah." This is in matters of seeking aid, and it applies in the same way. Now, this is your commentary. Given the aforementioned citation by their totem, Ibn Taymiyyah, the sect of Wahhabism seized upon this, building their illusory theories upon this house of cards. Their books constantly mentioning and emphasizing it. At times, they've gone to great mental acrobatics in his defense and purported meaning, including seeking to shield the channels of transmission from any criticism. In contrast to their acrobatics in trying to level criticism against any Sahih Hadith that doesn't fall in line with their temperament of deviancy and vain desires, one can clearly see in the following set of quotations, which we begin by presenting the rationale of Salih ibn Abdul Aziz al-Sheikh on this. But this is from this Salih. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Indeed, help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah." The companions' request to seek help from the Prophet ﷺ was permissible because they asked for assistance in something within his power. Thus, when they said, "Let's go and seek help from the Messenger of Allah," they were seeking help from the Prophet regarding that what was within his ability. However, the Prophet ﷺ taught them the proper etiquette and the highest form of seeking help by saying, "Indeed, help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah." The companions did clarify a turning to the Prophet in matters within his capacity, but he clarified that their obligation is first and foremost to seek help from Allah. He said, help is not sought from me, and this phrase contains a prohibition, meaning do not seek from me in this matter, rather seek help from Allah. I mean, even if that was a valid narration, would the articulation of that indicate prohibition or just a recommendation?
Most like a recommendation. But anyway, the whole thing is messed up, really.
Okay.
Is the hadith is invalid anyway. But because Ibn Taymiyyah invoked it, we need to respond to it.
Mhm.
They regard that as a major point they rely
Yes.
upon.
Mhm. And something that they've built an entire framework of takfir around.
That's it. That's the main thing. That's actually the whole thing is neither standing for nor seeking help. Neither one of them is because can't be commented upon because of this hadith, because the isnad is broken. And the story in full is obviously, as Ibn Kathir said, very strange. Mentioning all these characteristics of the Prophet in one hadith is not the habit of the Prophet to talk, to give such a long sermon, which preferences he has. Like, I have been given this, 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 I have been given this. That's not the way the Prophet usually comments on things. He usually gives one item, 3 items, maximum 7 or 10, even 10, very rare. Very rare. Like when he speaks about major sins, he mentioned the kaba'ir, the major sins are 7. We know there are more than that, but in one sitting, he mentioned 7 of them. Another sitting, other 7, not completely different, but some different than the others, and so on. If you put all of them together and you compare with the Quran, you end maybe 15, 60 really major sins, something like that. But because the listener will never be able to absorb 10, 15 in one go. So it's scattered in various situations, settings, and etc. So that hadith itself is faulty in every respect.
Yeah, because I've heard that hadith so for example, the place fear in the hearts of an enemy. Both are these are. This has been. Is this?
Oh, this is not a tabattawatur. This, but it's one of them. One here, not in one sitting, not in one. So it looks like fabricated. Some put everything in one occasion. I mean, that's a type of fabrication. That some bits are authentic from another channels, even mutawatir, does not mean that in this composition with this incident it is true. It's an imaginary construction. So that has no authority.
So point 2, some scholars have said that in this. So this is again from this Al-Sheikh Salih chapter.
Yeah.
Some scholars have said that in the isnad of this hadith is Ibn Lahiya and his condition is known. The reason behind why the scholars of hadith sometimes report narrations whose channels of transmission may be questionable is as follows. This is considered if acceptable if the meaning of the hadith is supported by evidence by the Quran or the Sunnah. What is mentioned in this hadith in the words of the Prophet ﷺ, indeed help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah, is corroborated by verses previously cited. This is the approach of the people of hadith, the approach of those firmly grounded in knowledge. Among the people of hadith, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah stated in one of the discussions in a fatawa, the people of hadith don't use da'if hadith to evidence matters of usul, rather they utilize it to support a principle already established, or the matters related to subsidiary rulings. This is the approach of the Shaykh, may Allah have mercy on him, in this book. That is, they refer to a hadith in terms of the meaning they convey, rather than necessarily the exact strength in terms of transmission. Okay, so that's a pretty, that's a statement that probably needs to be discussed. Do you discuss it later on this?
What discuss what?
So for example, saying that to rely on weaker narration.
This is some point of view. It's irrelevant. You can't establish aqidah or any fundamental issue. Anyway.
They've also presupposed here that it corroborates what's already in line with the Kitab and Sunnah. Yeah. They have to establish that is Kitab and Sunnah would cover such an injunction.
So this is all just a circular argument.
Ironically, they use less to debunk other people's narrations when they bring them forward. Well, modern day Mudkhalis do anyway. It may well be a tall order, says your commentary, it may well be a tall order to try and argue that this approach, Salih ibn Abdul Aziz al-Sheikh, is that which is based upon a method or approach of those firmly grounded in knowledge. Next, so you're basically debunking that. Next, Sulaiman ibn Sahman went substantially overboard with the following comments made in the work Al-Diya Al-Shariq في رد شبهات الماذق المعرق. The narrator Ibn Lahiya was cited by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, and he crossed the threshold of their criteria. Only one that is ignorant of the science and terminology of hadith would find fault in what Ibn Lahiya narrated. Whoever criticizes Ibn Lahiya based on the words of some people would then have to criticize many great hadith scholars. In any case, Ibn Lahiya was better than those who permitted seeking help from the Messenger of Allah and peace and blessing be upon him, and was more knowledgeable of the book of Allah and the Sunnah of his Messenger and the statements of the scholars than they were. That's just typical. That's typical what you hear today. Just partisan.
This guy is going overboard defending the hadith, discussing as if Lahiya is the issue. Lahiya is not an issue anyway.
But just that, the way they articulate that, say, because it's this, and he's better than those people who detract from him,
Yeah.
without addressing the issue. And again, it's partisan bias. However, the editor of this is your wording of that work by Ibn Salman, Abdullah Salim ibn Barjas, Ibn Nasir ibn Abdul Karim, fundamentally did not agree with this extremism and attempted to soften the stance he took. The footnote to the aforementioned quote that he provides in the work reads as follows. This is the inclination of the esteemed author, may Allah have mercy on him, regarding the narration of Ibn Lahiya, and he has mentioned his basis for it. However, his viewpoint that he crossed the threshold meeting their criteria in brackets with Al-Bukhari and Muslim narrating from him isn't accepted. This is because Imam Ahmad only cited him alongside others, specifically the narrator Amr ibn al-Haris. It is well established that when narrators are cited in supporting or corroborating channels of transmissions, shahawid wal mutabiyat, rather than as the root underlying cause, this doesn't constitute authentication, serves as a subtle or a testing purpose for which they were included. This is in relation to Muslims' inclusion of Ibn Lahiya in the Sahih. With regards to Imam Muslim, this is in Kitab Al-Fitan of Sahih from Al-Muqri, from Haywa, and other than him. From Abu Aswad, he said a detachment was recruited from the people of Medina, e.g. the hadith narrated from Ikramah ibn Abbas. He narrated this hadith by this channel of reporting in the books of Al-I'tisam, Tafsir An-Nisa, and in another place the book of Talaq, without naming the parallel narrator alongside Haywa. Ibn Hajar said, there is no doubt that this is Ibn Lahiya. However, this does not count as strengthening the narration, let alone authenticating him or deeming him to have crossed the threshold. Regarding the author's comment that only one that is ignorant of science and terminology of hadith would find fault in what Ibn Lahiya narrated, he does not mean to disparage the early scholars, as some have misunderstood, as evidenced by his acknowledgement of the differing opinions about Ibn Lahiya mentioned at the end of this section and the beginning of the third section. Rather, in his view, he is referring to those who fail to properly apply the principles of ta'deel to the statements of the early scholars. Undoubtedly, the author's stance here is incorrect on this matter, though he is not the first to unconditionally authenticate Ibn Lahiya, as many earlier and later scholars have done so before him. What appears most accurate regarding the hadith Ibn Lahiya is in relation to Ash-Shahawid wal-Mutabiyat. The following has been cited in Fatwa al-Lajna ad-Da'ima. This hadith explicitly states that one should not seek help from the Prophet ﷺ or anyone lesser than him. The Prophet ﷺ disliked such wording being used for him, even though he is capable of being sought for help in his lifetime in order to safeguard the sanctity of Tawheed, blocking the means to shirk, maintain humility before his Lord, and warn the Ummah against the means of shirk in words and deeds. If this was the case during his lifetime when he was capable of being sought for help, then how can it be permissible to beseech him after his death and ask for matters that only Allah the Almighty has power over? And if this applies to a messenger of Allah, what about those lesser than him? With regards to ijma, the ummah is unanimous that dua is exclusively to Allah the Almighty. Directing it to anyone else is shirk. So this is quite a thing to construct out of kind of flimsy premise. Here, observe this brazen lie, the appeal to ijma, consensus. by the Lord of the Kaaba. This is falsehood. Perhaps the Wahhabi sect means by this consensus that is built exclusively by them and for them because they consider everyone else to be mushrik and kafir. The next the following has been mentioned in Fatawa al-Shubahat al-Islamiyah. We have previously explained the cases in which the phrase Ya Rasulullah sallallahu may be used and the ruling for each case in Fatwa number 14614 so refer to it. Regarding the phrase Ya Muhammad, O Muhammad, it is not among the expressions of exclamation. Rather, it is most commonly used by the general public as a way of seeking help from the Prophet ﷺ. For this reason, it should be avoided as an expression of astonishment in order to block their means. And to avoid resembling those who say it is a form of seeking aid. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said in Kitab Al-Istighatha regarding the narration, it is suitable for supporting evidence and its meaning is indicated by the Quran and Sunnah. He elaborated in Talkhis Kitab Al-Istighatha in clarifying the soundness of his meaning. Sheikh Sulaiman ibn Ubaid Abdullah said in Tafsir Al-Aziz Al-Hamid, what is meant by this is guidance towards proper wording and protection by him, peace and blessings be upon him, of the cause of Tawheed and the exaltation of Allah, blessed and exalted. So if this was his peace and blessings be upon his statement regarding seeking help from him in matters he is able to do so, then how much greater is the prohibition in seeking help from him or from anyone else in major matters that none is capable of except Allah. Yet this is what is often found on the tongues of many poets and others, and few people recognize that this is munkar, let alone realizing that it constitutes shirk. For further benefit, see Fatwa number 31789. So Al-Ghunayman took a philosophical stance in his commentary on Fath al-Majid, where he said, and similar to that is the aforementioned hadith in which a man from among the companions was harmed by a hypocrite. So he said, let us go to the Messenger of Allah and seek help. And it is known that the Messenger of Allah sallam, could have commanded that he be killed, and if he had said to one of the companions, execute him, they would have hastened eagerly to carry it out. Indeed, they would have raced to do so. But he, peace and blessing be upon him, intended to block the means that could open avenues to what is impermissible. Similar examples, very many of them, have been clarified in the hadith of
this guy went overboard, even that he could have ordered him to be killed and all of these nonsense. They're desperate to construct something where nothing is there. Yeah. Really nothing there.
However, Ali ibn Hussein Faqihi was in a somewhat better state when he philosophized in Arshif Multaqa al-Hadith. The hadith is da'if, weak, and the khabar, if authentic, could be understood in one of two ways. First, that the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed, help is not sought from me, because he was not able to kill Abdullah ibn Ubay, since he, peace and blessing be upon him, was prevented from doing so, lest people say that Muhammad kills his companions. Secondly, that he, peace and blessing be upon him, said, this is a way of blocking the means, even though he was able to execute him, imprison him, or expel him from the land. Rather, he said it as a precautionary measure so that people would not become lax in such speech and make it a habit, thereby falling into what is forbidden. I mean, that seems more balanced, although it still seems to be reading more into it.
All of it is just going around without going anywhere. Because every time you say istighatha is ibadah, the moment you say that, you are stuck.
And he did that because of
the same principle. Certain acts are ibadah in themselves. We discussed that at length in the general principle.
Mm-hmm. Finally, Al-Alusi said the following in Tafsir Ruh al-Ma'ani. The second point is that people have become excessively engaged in invoking Allah other than Allah, exalted is He, among the awliya, saints, whether living or deceased, or others, such as saying, O Sayyidi Fulan, help me. This is in no way among the categories of permissible tawassul, intercession. What befits a believer is to refrain from uttering such words and not to linger near its precincts. Some among the scholars have deemed it shirk, and even if it is not explicitly so, it certainly approaches it. I do not believe that anyone who says such things does so unless he harbors a belief that the one called upon, whether a living absentee or a veiled deceased, possess knowledge of the unseen, or hears the call, or is capable, either independently or through another, of bringing benefit or averting harm. Otherwise, he would not have called out to him, nor opened his mouth with such utterance. Indeed, therein lies a severe trial from your Lord. Prudence dictates to avoid this, not asking except from Allah the Almighty, the doer of what He wills. And whoever discovers the secret, وَمَنْ وَقَفَ عَلَى سِرٍّ, of what Al-Tabrani narrated in his Mujam, that a hypocrite was abusing the Muslims, and a Siddiq said, let's go and seek help from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu. So when they came from the Messenger of Allah against this hypocrite, so when they said to him, he said, indeed, help is not sought from me, rather help is sought from Allah the Almighty. One who understands the wisdom in this will not doubt that istighatha from the occupants of graves, who are either felicitous, occupied by blessings, and freely moving in gardens to pay attention to what is in this world, or are wretched, distracted by punishment and entrapment in fire from answering the callers and listening to people of their assembly, is something that must be avoided and is unsuited for possessors of sound minds to be engaged in. Let it not delude you that the one seeking help from the creation at times has his need fulfilled and his objective accomplished, for that is a trial and tribulation from him, great and glorious is he. At times the devil takes the form to the one asking help of the one he asks help from, so he believes it to be a miracle of the one he asks help from. Far, far, very far. Indeed, it is only the devil misguiding him and turning him astray. Some ignoramuses say this is part of the growth of the soul of the one asked for help, or an angel appearing in his form as his miracle. Evil is their judgment, although the soul's growth and an angel's appearance are possible, it won't be in such a situation when committing such a crime. We ask Allah, exalted is He, with His names, to protect us from this. We take as an intermediary His grace to ask Him to make us and you walk on the best of paths. Now, this is your commentary. All praise is due to Allah. This batil hadith, which is not sahih, now by some miraculous intervention contains the secret within it. To Allah be inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. To be completely fair to Al-Alusi, may Allah have mercy upon him, he wasn't strictly speaking a pure adherent to the sect of Wahhabism. Rather, he could be viewed as being semi-Wahhabi. The editor of the work, Ali Abdul Bari Atiyah, added a footnote to the text, which is marked in parentheses. So it's got a reference to it. It seems he couldn't allow the comments made by Al-Alusi to pass without adding his word of caution, which was, this is the truth, which is that one completely avoids that. What the author inclined to, therefore, regarding permissibility, is his own opinion and is not acceptable to take heed. Okay. So, any commentary on this overall, then, just as to summary?
Just because they made it big, maybe I spent too much time with that. Maybe it's not worth all of that. It's not serious. It's not well established. The method of hadith shows there's some kind of fabrication by someone. Most likely the rajul, the mubham, the unknown man, after Ubadah ibn Samit is most likely the one responsible for that. And nothing can be taken from that of any authority. But if someone has a certain idea in his mind and invoke these things, that's because of desire, not because it really should be invoked as evidence. And Ibn Taymiyyah has this bad habit. In many other occasions, he takes nasty hadith as an evidence. But because it's related to shirk and iman and kufr is very grave. In other places, issues related to hukum shara'i, okay, you may say, okay, we can skip that. That's not so fundamental. But he has other cases of similar type, unfortunately. That's how bias could blind you. You get a certain idea from whatever source is, or from the general principle you have developed, which is maybe faulty, and then you get stuck, and then you try to find justification for bits and pieces and so on.
It's strange. An entire edifice was made just from this, Lord. Because I would say that maybe a chapter on istighatha could be worth doing in the new edition, because istighatha is becoming an issue in terms of
It comes in the dua. This is because istighatha is a dua, calling for help.
Okay, excellent.
Calling for this, calling for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's actually two chapters from now.
Mm-hmm. Or section. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's actually quite a long section. So I might suggest we do that in a dedicated next week, because that's about 30 odd pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to. It might be worth doing it as one session.
Mm-hmm.
But well, let's see how we get on, inshallah. Okay. So we finished that chapter. We are now on chapter 5. Circumambulating around the dwarf, around the grave. Grave is not worship of it. That's page 251. As for the claim of the Wahhabi sect that tawaf, circumambulation, around graves such as the grave of Abdul Qadir al-Jalani or Ahmed al-Badawi is to be considered an act of shirk kufri, idolatrous disbelief that expels one from the fold of Islam by the mere act of performing it, as in the mere act of tawaf, simply because it imitates or resembles the tawaf around the Kaaba in form, regardless of the inner belief of the person concerning those individuals. Notwithstanding the intention behind the act, they typically put it concisely as being tawaf around the graves as ibadah, worship of the graves. Their statement, besides being a pure mistake and a baseless accusation, reveals the lack of intellectual substance of the Wahhabi sect. It is evidence of their superficial approach to actions and their confusion concerning the dimensions of those actions. Nor are their opponents, the opponents of the Wahhabi sect, deeper in thought or better than them, with very few exceptions. For instance, when one of them says tawaf around graves is not necessarily shirk, nor is it an act of ibadah, it is like tawaf around Al-Bayt al-Haram, just as tawaf around Al-Bayt is not an act of ibadah directed to Al-Bayt itself. Likewise, tawaf around a grave is not an act of ibadah directed to the grave. Yes, tawaf is performed with something or around something. It is done with a particular intention in mind. The following can serve as a few examples, namely, an athlete preparing for a long-distance race, e.g. a 10,000-meter race, might train by running dozens of times around the center of a large stadium. The purpose here is to strengthen the muscles and achieve physical fitness. This is undoubtedly considered tawaf around the center of the stadium, yet is not directed towards anything in particular. It is neither an act of ibadah to the stadium, nor is it an act of ibadah to anything else whatsoever. Another example is a person performs tawaf around the Kaaba with firm certainty that Allah is the one and only God, seeking closeness to Him and obeying His command. This is a tawaf of ibadah directed to Allah, while at the same time it is considered tawaf around the Kaaba, not an act of ibadah directed to the Kaaba as an object itself. A person may also perform tawaf around an architectural structure or a work of art to appreciate all its aesthetic dimensions. The purpose here is the aesthetic appreciation. This is tawaf around the building or the artwork, yet it is not an act of worship of the structure or the piece, nor it is an act of worship directed to anything else whatsoever. The devotees who believe in the divinity of Krishna in India perform tawaf around every temple dedicated to Krishna, seeking closeness to this false deity and idol. This is tawaf of ibadah directed to Krishna, and at the same time it is tawaf around the walls of the temple. It is not an act of ibadah to the temple itself, nor to its walls. It is then an established fact that a person's tawaf around a grave is not in its essence a mere act of tawaf, an act of worship directed to the grave. The real question is, what is the actual intention of the one performing this tawaf around the grave? He must have an intention, otherwise he would be considered insane and the pen would be lifted from him, or perhaps a blind man whose cane has failed him and who by mere coincidence stumbles along a path that happens to resemble tawaf in its form. Is the intention to seek closeness to Allah, believing with firm certainty that He is the one and only by performing tawaf around the grave of one of his prophets or one of his awliyas in honor and veneration towards the saint as a form of devotion to Allah. Accordingly, tawaf around the grave would be an act of ibadah directed to Allah, certainly not an act of worship to the grave itself, as the Wahhabi sect has crudely claimed. Nevertheless, it is an invalid and innovative ibadah, for there is undisputed consensus that Allah has not commanded tawaf around a specific point or place, neither as an obligation nor as a recommendation, except for tawaf around the Kaaba. And whoever seeks closest to Allah through that for which there is absolutely no established evidence of its obligation or recommendation, he has ordained some polytheistic beliefs which Allah has not authorized. Alan, is this correct? Whoever seeks through that for which there is no absolute established evidence of its obligation or recommendation, he has ordained some polytheistic beliefs which Allah has not authorized. And this in itself,
translation is not good. This by legislating for himself. That's
okay.
That's the issue there. Not because he's not allowed to legislate. Because circumambulating the Kaaba is ordered by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala as an act of devotion to Him. Does not mean that circumambulating some other places you can declare it to be the place is blessed or something, meaning that circumambulating is an act which brings you closer to Allah. You have to have evidence for that, independent from that. And there's no evidence. The moment you declare it better than permissible, it's permissible. You can circumambulate if you want, but it's just whatever. But declaring it to be pleasing to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, meaning you are concluding about Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala legislation without having an evidence for Him. And this is not your authority. You're making yourself a legislator.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
and
bid'ah. It's a bid'ah. It's an innovation. That's the real definition of bid'ah. Is legislating, but the one who is doing it does not think that he's doing legislation. That's the reason it is not declared clearly to be directly as a kufr. Because he may be confused. He may think he can make comparison. He can make qiyas, things like that. So is having ta'wil. But the act itself, purely seen, should not have been declared to be a devotion to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, because you cannot devote yourself to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala in a way which He did not ordain. Yeah.
And it's and it's in the same way legislation covers temporal affairs.
Yeah, it has to have an evidence that
because sometimes sometimes when the madkhalis they ignore legislation, but they focus on this is the flip of that.
That's the reason they are very happy to be on the Wahhabi sect, so they can talk about graves, they can talk about idols, about circumambulating, but they don't talk about legislation. They run away from it. Say that.
It's interesting that this is legislation. Legislation is the one that's usually temporal affairs, but now it's covered.
That's the reason there's a complete called Tawheed before Hakimiyya. Tawheed first and then Hakimiyya. As if Hakimiyya is not part of Tawheed. That's it. Shows you the mindset. They don't say Hakimiyya is wrong, but say it's not Tawheed. It is something extra. Which shows the definition of Tawheed is fundamentally false.
And this in itself is a heinous innovation, meaning it represents shirk and kufr in its essence. Its doer is among those about whom Allah has said, "Have you seen the one who has taken his own desire as a god, whom Allah allows to stray in the face of knowledge, sealing his ears and hearts, and covering his eyes? Who can guide such a person after Allah has done this? Will you people not take heed?" Thus, such a person is a mushrik and kafir. He is not a grave worshipper. Rather, he worships his own desires, except for those who are excused due to ignorance or misinterpretation. And this, Allah willing, is a case of most Muslims who fall into such practices, or compulsion or other impediments to takfir. Or is the intention merely to honor and revere the occupant of the grave? We say it is difficult to conceive it without being mixed with a form of seeking closeness to Allah. The occupant of the grave would not have deserved from the one performing tawaf such reverence and honor in this specific manner, except due to their status with Allah. Honoring and revering the prophets of Allah is undoubtedly a means of seeking closeness to Allah. So how can how then can one imagine a heart and mind completely devoid of any intention of seeking closeness to Allah? This then, and Allah knows best, seems to fall into the previous category, especially when we take into consideration that honoring a living person is expressed through greeting them face to face, embracing them, kissing their hands, and perhaps even their feet. So if this person had abandoned his tawaf and instead thrown himself upon the grave, embracing and kissing it, this might have been understandable and would not create serious issues. Besides, we have never seen a living person perform tawaf around another living person unless he intended to attack him or assassinate him. Or perhaps the one performing tawaf believes that the occupant of the grave possesses some aspect of divinity, such as believing that Allah has indwelled him, or that he has evolved or ascended into divine being, following the way of the Indian sage Durvasa, or that Allah has truly associated him in his divine sovereignty in such a way that Allah is unable to restrain his actions or invalidate what has been confirmed. Accordingly, there is no need for deep analysis or extensive reflection. This undoubtedly is tawaf of ibadah directed towards the occupant of the grave. This undoubtedly is tawaf of ibadah directed towards the occupant of the grave, or ibadah of the buried individual in the grave. It is at the same time tawaf around the grave. There is no need for deep analysis. I think this is wordly. It gives the wrong wording. Okay. It is incorrect to say ibadah of the grave, but this saying comes from the ignorant masses and those who call each other by offensive names. As for the people of knowledge and serious inquiry, they only say ibadah of the occupant of the grave or ibadah to the buried individual. And perhaps there are other types of tawaf and other purposes. The discerning reader will be capable of evaluating them properly if he examines them with enlightened insight and analyzes them in detail with utmost precision and care. And what we have mentioned in this chapter regarding tawaf around the grave, as well as what we have mentioned in a previous chapter about standing with humility and stillness in a specific manner, and likewise about sujood, prostration, also applies to crawling, creeping, walking, jogging, or performing say. The ritual of walking between Safa and Marwa is in a specific manner at a specific place. None of these actions constitute acts of ibadah in the first place. Therefore, we shall not elaborate on it or attempt to prove it. Okay, just some contention here around the wording. According there is no need for deep analysis or extensive reflection. This undoubtedly is the tawaf of ibadah directed towards the occupant of the grave. Is this you're contending that statement?
Based on the belief which mentioned before. If that
I
belief
see
is
it.
there, that's it. That's very clear. Obviously.
I see it. In that
Right.
context,
That's
yeah.
very clear. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and that by the necessity, yeah, by necessity. If you believe something divine in the one buried, then this is this tawaf is an act expressing devotion and enslavement toward that one buried. But essentially, the burial point or the burial place is just a reference point because he's not in the grave as a divine being. It's just the remaining of the body, if there's any remaining left. It's just a reference point, exactly like Kaaba, regarding the house of Allah, or the point of reference. With the devotion and the enslavement is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's so the whole thing says that the tawaf itself by itself is the ibadah is just nonsensical. That doesn't make any sense. Even around the grave has nothing to do with any ibadah or anything else, except when the point of reference, the center of some combination, is connected to an entity which has some divine attributes. Then we are out of the realm of that. And then even the expression he's tawaf around the grave is worshipping the grave is wrong, because you're not worshipping the grave, you're worshipping the entity which the grave is supposed to be the place of its burial.
Okay, that concludes this chapter. I mean, we can start. We can probably start the next chapter. There's this 10:20. We've only done 1 hour, 10 minutes or so. Okay, before I do, there's a question here. What is your stance on Sufism, specifically Fana?
What's Sufism? What's the meaning of Sufism? What's the meaning
You know,
of Sufism?
the Sufis, when they do something called fana,
Do what?
fana, when they
What's
say
fana? What's fana? Explain what they mean with fana. People ask about words which they themselves don't know what's the meaning of it.
okay. Well, it's been asked in the chat, so on the YouTube.
Fana is very simple. There's some Sufi claim that you indulge in dhikr or remembering Allah until you think you have disappeared. Only Allah is present. So you focus on Allah in such a way that your own presence appears out, get out of your consideration and focus completely. And some people think that they mean with that they have merged with Allah and so on. No, they're not necessarily. Some may think this way. Some may think this way. That's something else, but that will be then the discussing the issue of divine essence, divine attributes, and things like that. But the other one is just a feeling, so that you focus on Allah in such a way, because you have to have Allah the center of your existence and devotion, and He's the beginning and the end and the center of devotion. But this is not continuously present, such a way all the time. Yourself is still present. Your needs are still present. The Sufis say the peak of really, and that you come to a level that you ignore that you exist, as if you are not there. Only Allah is there. That's the meaning of fana. It's a feeling. It's a situation like excessive meditation or excessive fasting or things like that, which is not, if you look at it sharply, it is not a desirable state of affair. Because the desirable state of affair is to be intellectually aware that Allah is the center of existence. He's the beginning, He's the end, He's the most immanent and most transcendent at the same time, and recognize that intellectually, and you feel it in certain moments, but it cannot be a situation that these moments extend so long that you disappear. You don't notice your own existence. But they claim they reach such a situation, maybe by exercising, by focusing on something until you ignore everything else. It gets out of your, you could say it's over-focusing, instead of believing or rationally conceiving that Allah is the center of everything, the center of meaning, is the target of everything, is the beginning of everything, which is dictated by necessity of reason. You feel it in such a way that your existence seems to be disappearing from your vision field, from internal vision field. There may be moments like that can happen to everyone. Certain extreme moments, yes. Certain it can happen from time to time and so on, but it's not a state of affair which you should fast and do dhikr, like repeating a certain sentence 1,000, 10,000 times until you switch off. That's not desirable, nor it is clear from all the prophets when they address the people that they mention something like that. So more meditation and a remembrance of Allah taken to an extreme, which may be going overboard. You cannot say it's haram, but it should not be done, because it contradicts human nature to be like that, continuously having Allah in the focus of your eye. If that's the case, you'll not be able even to go to the loo or go to eat, which is not possible. So that's what I can say about fana. The other thing is that they believe that they merged with Allah and they disappeared and they became one with Allah, a real oneness. What does this mean? You are Allah, you are the entity. And sometimes they utter things like that, similar, like the claim that someone knocked at Al-Hallaj, that's a famous man of this time, of this Sufi, and he knocked the door, said, and then he answered, the man at the door said, is Al-Hallaj inside? Or so and so on with his name. He answered, nothing in the house except Allah. Now we can interpret that he is in a situation of such jadab. He has lost his mind is absent, or that he believes that he is Allah and everything is Allah. So believe in pantheism. This can be misinterpreted. It's not clear what is the wahdatul wujud or wahdatul shuhud. Is it pantheism or pan-visualism? You see only Allah. But still you are the one seeing, separate from Allah. But because you are finite and your vision is limited, you see only in this direction. Everything else is out of focus completely. Yeah. So that's questions like that are not very productive. And the people explain that if you ask a Sufi to explain, the majority will not explain you to any great extent, except you have to feel it, you have to do this, to do that, and so on. And we'll see from the practice, it is not a natural practice.
It almost sounds like hyperventilation.
Yeah, something like that. Something is
hypnosis, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have
Al-Baji is an Andalusian philosophy that what some Sufi and so on claim and so on is due to after extreme isolation or fasting. Like some of them start with reducing food a bit and bit and bit. One I remember reading one booklet written by one of those, not in Andalusia, a Shami one, a Syrian one, several centuries ago, with the title السير والسلوك إلى ملك الملوك, the advancement and direction to the King of Kings. And he described his experience, how he devoted himself and so on. And so he has a feeling that he is not devoted to Allah enough. So he got advice from Sufi or from whatever. So he went into seclusion and started reducing his food until a handful of barley only, nothing else, and water. And then ultimately he succeeded in surviving on a daily one seed of barley for so many days. And then after that, he came in that state. So Al-Baji comments, not in this man, on other people who did similar practice, no wonder that they feel seeing the divine and things like that. Because what actually happened, if you have reduced the food to such an extent, you have physiologically caused damage to your brain. You are using a damaged brain. All these is hallucinations, which is a respectable point of view. It's really hard to know. You don't reach such situation except by either extreme deprivation from food and fasting, while water is still supplied, otherwise you will dry up and die. And you can survive without food for months, actually, just with water. That's possible, but obviously you will not be able to have enough energy for the structured, normal way of thinking. Because you need the brain being supplied with energy enough to the brain is very energy hungry. The biggest energy consumer in the body is the brain, definitely. So, and the nerve cells. So that's but you could achieve that also by personal persuasion, like a placebo effect, by indulging in dhikr and focusing without even the issue of food. But usually, dhikr alone will not. Also, so we will tell you have to do fasting, prayer, certain bodily movements, and then in the later stage to get in wahdat al-shuhud and fana and things like that. But it's definitely not a desirable state of affair. It would have been desirable to have been, they have been mentioned by the Prophet and some other prophets in time past, and explained clearly in such a way to make it as something desirable. There's one hadith which gives something, say that when we are in your presence, the Sahaba telling themselves Allah, then we are so devoted to knowing about Allah and the Day of Judgment and the universe and so on, so that we are in a state different than when you go our families, then we're busy with the wives and the kids and so on and life, and we forgot all of that. It's not present in our mind. Say, if you could stay like this, like in my presence, the angels will shake hands with you. You'll be able to see the angels, which we know it's not possible physically in normal situation. But that's not possible. 1 hour you may be like that, but in that case it's induced by being with the Prophet and listening to his advice, his discussion, his education, his recitation of the Quran, explanation, things like that. Not by just repeating one sentence 1,000 times or tens of thousands of times, or by reducing food until you're getting physical damage or something like that. Even in fasting, he gave the injunction that you should have sahur, even if if at least having a sip of water and maybe one date or something like that. And don't continue fasting wisal without sahur or without breaking a fast. So the night is also you are fasting like the day, more than one day. And they told him, do you do wisal? Say, I'm not like you. I have another capabilities. And then what they say, oh no, we would like to imitate you. So he did wisal for them for 1 week until they started collapsing. Told him, didn't I tell you? You are not able to do that.
There's a couple, his
So that's
people-
just a general answer. All of this is matter of experience and so on.
when people aim to seek piety outside of what's already established, because there's an example of 3 men who came to the Prophet. I don't know how strong the narration is. It's been narrated a few times. And when they observed the Prophet, they said, I will fast continuously. Another one says, I will abstain from marriage.
People get off there because not the majority of people are normally well balanced, but there will be people who have some inclination to some extremism in one direction or another.
But the Prophet's response to them was that I fast and I break my fast.
Yeah.
I marry.
Exactly. It's not possible. It's just a human being built with this body and this blood flow and all these complications to go to such extremes, thinking this will bring them closer to Allah. It is an imagination. The same with this fana. They think if they are in fana, it is a high state of consciousness. I don't think it is.
I mean, here's an example. I remember, the community, Pakistani community, you'll find the greatest successes of anything, retardation, basically. When they have the zikr session, so a friend of mine went there, and we went kind of like just to have a look at, or for a laugh. And what they do is they say Allahu, Allahu, and they start saying who in quick succession.
Yeah.
To me, that looks like hyperventilation.
Yeah, exactly. That's
So
what
it's
I say.
like- it's
By
actually sort of-
repeating,
so you think that
instead of reducing food until you have brain damage,
Yeah.
you do that until you have the mind affects the brain. That's what they call
But the point is that in the Quran? Who? No, it's
No,
Allah.
individual, even if it's in the Quran, if it's Allah, even that, it doesn't matter the technicality. So if you go to the Wahhabis, they get stuck in the technicality. It's not the technicality, it's not the issue. Huwa, he is the one who he is. The eternal, the necessary existing, abbreviated Huwa. Okay, no problem. Or Yahweh, or that's the meaning of Yahweh, essentially. Who is he? Is who himself. That's okay, no problem in itself. But the problem is that the repeating, and so that the normal thinking process will be switched off, and then you go into a state of alternate consciousness or something like that. And this is not a desirable state of affairs. It may be permissible. You may want to experiment one day with it. Go ahead and do it, but don't think it's a bring you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's sometimes a devil is. I remember the following happened with Mamdouh bin Abdul Aziz. Someone introduced me to him who used to be studying in Germany sometime. He did not succeed, went back, and then after I came back several years, he detected that I exist when the certain movements of Tajdeedriya, movements of criticism, of postmodernism, people who are talking about this philosophy and so on. Nobody dares going to the political aspects, starting with philosophy, social aspects. And there was gatherings and conferences and so on, initiated by Janadriya, which was established by Abdullah bin Aziz, not by him. He's too dull and too dumb to do anything, but his deputy, his wakil of Haras Watani, Tuwaijri, a very sharp, most like a nationalistic Nasri man, and unlikely to be an Islamist, established that to give the National Guard Abdullah some kind of a intellectual cover, make him presentable because he was at the time the crown prince, but nobody regarded him as ever become a king. So he wants to, he can become, he has some intellectual aspect. So it's that way they're working that, and established this festivities of Janadriya, initially as a camel race first. Then they added like a museum of Bedouin artifacts and Bedouin jewelry, so like pop culture. And then third year, he added some lectures around that. in the King Faisal Hall in Riyadh. The lecture started modest about poetry, modern poetry, and then it's increased until we have later in the 80s, even people coming lecturing about Kant, critique of pure reason and things like very high things, and communism and dialectic materialism and things like that. So I participated in some of these things in one episode and commented on some of those, and was spreading widely in Arabia, became known, famous because of that. So this old friend who was with us in Germany in the 60s and failed and came back, went back home, came and she said, do you remember me? Yes, sir. A very nice fellow. Became more devoted and religious. In Germany, he was quite loose, was almost lost. But then he controlled himself. And somehow he was in contact with this Mamdouh bin Abdulaziz, who died recently. And said, I want to introduce you to him because this man is religious and so on. He may be a light at the end of the tunnel concerning Al Saud, because the consensus is that the big ones of Al Saud are all corrupt and all, even some people have a doubtful iman in the first place. People doubt that Fahd is a Muslim in the first place. That's a common knowledge, by the way, in Arabia. But this one seems to be devoted. So he introduced to me. And then slowly, I was very cautious because you cannot trust these Al Saud anyway. And he said that he would like to discuss with me about Salman al-Auda. He thinks Salman al-Auda and his lectures are quite good, but the man is arrogant, he's overcritical for the royals or things like that. Said, I don't think Salman al-Auda is overcritical. I think he's quite cautious, but anyway, I can discuss with him. So yeah, I can. He's good, this Mamdouh. So I met him after some meetings and so on. I defended Salman al-Auda in a reasonable way, well-balanced way. Said if something seems to be squeezing, that's because of his background from the Wahhabi school, which is rigid and narrow, not because of he's arrogant or something like that. You should establish a relation with him, also learn from him. If he would have done that, would have been better for him, but he did not do. And then he told me about his becoming religious, and his son Naif is still alive. His Naif has been completely taken over by Madkhali Jami and so on, unfortunately. Because this is easy if you are from the royals and you don't want to feel criticized that you are a tyrant or legislating not what Allah revealed or your family, then it's good to have an ideology which protects you from that. Human nature, human weakness. Again, your desire direct you to the ideology and the point of view which fits your desire, not the one fits the evidence. And especially the Madkhali direction of the Wahhabi claim to be based on evidence. We have nothing contradicting Quran Sunnah. Everything is based on Quran Sunnah 100%. That's how they marketed themselves for 2.5 centuries. That's the marketing hormone. The people claim that we're innovative. No. Not even one dot we have different than Quran Sunnah. That's what they claim. So they could hijack this knife. But at the time, they did not hijack it completely. He was in contact with some people of Sufi and Ash'ari and that background. So he's quite open at that time. That was in the late 80s. Yeah, late 80s, early 90s. And he did, the people of Sufi persuasion were also most likely pleased that someone from Al Saud is at least have some religious inclination. So they thought they would be able to color him better for Islamic purposes. Islamic ideas, which is good. It's a good intention. But which practice they were offering? He mentioned what they were doing, for example, he was in Jeddah and Mecca. So these are not Madkhali yet. The Madkhali came later and took him away and finished him. But before that, so he told me what he's doing. Like, for example, they have established the following rule. At Fajr time, every day, after Salat al-Fajr, they go, they pray in the masjid near one main cemetery in Jeddah, because his father's house is near to one of those. After praying, they pray, as usually they pray in Saudi Arabia, Salat al-Fajr relatively early, just by the real dawn or around. And then they go to the cemetery. Usually there are a few graves which have been prepared, because Jeddah is huge. You can expect for that day, there will be few dead coming anyway. So the grave master, the grave manager, is having graves dug and ready for whoever comes. Yeah, they're ready. So what they do, one goes down in the grave and lay in the grave to imagine what happens to him after death. Which is a good exercise. It will soften your heart. I'm not denying that. Imagine yourself, the world have ended, and now you're facing all your good deeds. And simulating it by doing it really in a grave. I wouldn't recommend that to anybody, but for some people, especially from royals who are living lavishly and so on, that may be a good starting push. So he mentioned that and how this is effective on his heart and so on. I said, that's good and so on. I wouldn't mind that and so on. We should continue in that. And that is good to soften the heart. Said, but the ancient Salaf, they have a better tool for that, to soften the heart. They say the best way to soften your heart, if your heart is hard, the best way is to visit orphan houses, orphan places, and just touch the heads of the orphan. That softens your heart better than laying in the grave. That's number one. See the difference between the Salaf, Sahaba, and so on. Caring for the orphans softens you much more than laying in a grave and wondering what happens to you after death and things that remind yourself of death. Especially if you do it on a daily basis, this may be a little bit too excessive, but say maybe once a week. Okay, that's number one. Secondly, I cautiously asked him about, because there was a so-called an office called Office of Strategic Studies or Strategic Planning or something like that, adjoined to the royal court, to the Diwan, the office of the king. It's called Diwan al-Malaki, and there's a Diwan of the deputy king of the vice of the crown prince. So in the Diwan al-Malaki, there are various departments, and they have an office or subsection which is called Markaz al-Dirasat al-Istrategiya, Center for Strategic Studies. Big name. So I said, okay, good. It's very important to attend to that and so on. Say, Sheikh, this is just an office. Maybe a secretary is there to keep some papers. There's nothing there. No research isn't going. It's just nominal. They saw that I am now reaching the 40s and so on in age. And that was, we are late 80s now, 88, 89. And they want to keep me at bay, at peace, because when I meet them, especially Salman, they look down on my clothing, that my thobe is a bit short. You know, the Bad Khaliya, and Wahhabi obsessed with short thobe, should not touch the ground, because this is arrogance, something like that. Maybe they are partly right in that. So they look, why is your shop too short? What's happening? Are you becoming now mutawwir? One of the volunteers, one of the devotees? So they said, oh, let's get him busy with something. So they give that office. So obviously, it is he has the rank of a minister, salary-wise. So he's getting an extra 30,000, 40,000 per month as a salary, which he doesn't need. He has more money than that anyway. But so I encourage him, said, despite of that, try to make that office really alive. Try to employ people, start analyzing. And then said, concerning, one time I commented him, concerning going into the graves and laying there down and so on, that's good. I'm not saying you should stop that, but let me remind you of something. If you get an opportunity one day to tell your brother Fahad a good advice which benefit the ummah, a seriously good advice which benefit the ummah, which goes against his current policy, which is not benefiting the ummah, I told him this policy, and he said they are not religious, they are dangerous and so on. But get an opportunity, because if you come directly, that will be like an internal revolution and he may suffer harm. We don't want him to suffer harm. I think it's better if he goes step by step according to his capabilities. Then it's much better than 1,000 years going into the grave like that. So you see, but the people there, they did not find the way to go because they don't dare telling him, speak to Fahad and advise him against someone. Like, for example, take an opportunity, because at the time the discussion about usury banking was inflaming everywhere. Just when they tell him, brother, this is the catastrophe for us to have no usury banking in this country. We have to sort this problem out. Otherwise, it will destroy us one day. But get an opportunity to say that. For that, you have to do strategic studies first, establish yourself better than that. And this is more important. And I assure you, according to my best conviction, that will bring you closer to Allah than what you are doing now. So that direction of laying in the grave and this spirituality and eating this until only one barley seed, or Allah, Allah, huwa, a million times, is I would say is the devil diverting you from doing something which we have more, bring you closer to Allah 1,000 times than more than that. The devil tried to say, you are devoted, there's no way to get this one to be undevoted. He's gone. So let us deprive him from the real higher ranks. The higher ranks is really Shahada. And the highest Shahada is confronting tyrants. But confronting tyrants. So better go just until you think you are measured with Allah. That's just fine. You think you achieved spirituality. This is a fake spirituality. It's an irrational spirituality. That's it. So a long comment on what you think about Sufi and so on. Please, words do not make much sense. Study what they mean and so on. And don't worry what the Wahhabi say, because they say nonsense. Ibn Taymiyyah discussion Sufism is much better than them, by the way. But they don't understand Ibn Taymiyyah in that way. They don't read that section in his Majmu' al-Fatawa. There are 3 volumes, I think, about Tasawwuf. He talks about Wahdat al-Shuhud, Wahdat al-Wujud, all these things, and have good excuses for Sufi and for the statement. They should be reinterpreted sometimes. That some of them will be in a state of drunkenness that they think they are Allah, but this is just a moment of the mind is absent, so they are not accountable for that. Ibn Taymiyyah is sufficiently open-minded, big-minded enough to understand that. The other Wahhabi, they're so shallow, like circumambulating the grave is worshipping the grave. If they would just thought 1 second that circumambulating the Kaaba is not worshipping a Kaaba, they would say, how can it be called grave worship? How the comparison works? It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. Exactly like some simple-minded Christian, most likely because of this, not simple-minded, just extreme stupidity and ignorance, won't claim that the Muslim worship a Kaaba because they direct prayer in that direction. Because they are not even aware that in time past, at least now, the issue of Qibla has disappeared from Christianity almost. But officially, the churches, all ancient churches, are directed toward east. The Qibla is east, not Jerusalem, east, because they wanted to depart from the Qibla of the Jews, and they directed toward east. Why? What reason? Some people, they took it from the belief in the sun god, and the people are directing it towards east, the Qibla of the people, of the pagans, and they adopted this as a variation from the Jews because they don't like the Jews, whatever the origin of it. So there's a Qibla. Does this mean that you worship the east? No. Although there you would say, towards the east, indicate that you are worshipping the sun, regarding the sun as a divine being, is more suspicious than toward the Kaaba. Things like that. It's very shallow and trivial inability to see the reality of intentions of the creed behind an action, the motivation of action, to analyze things more than the most shallow and trivial way of looking at things. So even they talk about Sufism and spirituality will be like that, most likely. So such questions are not very productive. What do you think about Sufism and Fana, and as I explained?
I'd recommend to the person who asked the question, if you go through all the videos, inshallah, from the start, you get a firm understanding of what our point of view is.
It may be interesting. For example, there is some writing from modern people in the last century and until now, when the magic mushroom was detected and many people did experimentation. They will write to you what they felt and the experimentation and things like that. I would advise always nobody to do the experimentation, but if someone have written, some people have done it, Muslims or non-Muslims, and some have even writing in that, will show you the alternate state of minds, what they're feeling and things like that. You see how the chemistry interfere with the brain function in such a way.
That's interesting, because I remember there's a comedian, somebody did magic mushroom. So they said that, so this guy, he's a comedian, Bill Hicks, he used to talk about when he was off his face, he's saying that how you dissolve into one consciousness and all this kind of stuff. That sounds similar. That sounds pretty similar to
Yeah.
to that thing. But
Yeah.
to the questioner,
So besides fasting until the brain is deprived from food, which is a bit dangerous, and the other one, magic mushroom will do it with less danger, but obviously the
prohibition.
guys who do it in a substantially small amount, carefully, because the amount is too big, you may never come back from the state. That's the only danger there. Otherwise, really, so it's not advisable to experiment, but some people experimented and this helps. So you can read it and see what's happening there.
Just to the question, just to put some context around this, what this work is about is building things from a fundamental basis. Now, what's happened is over time, the Saudi petrodollar has weaponized and magnified a certain voice, which is erroneous. So this entire discussion from the Wahhabi school is to label the other side as mushrik, kafir, etc., etc. What these halakas are about is to redress the entire thing, to build everything from absolute certainty. And what you find is that the Wahhabi doctrine has fundamental problems, and we're coming up to the fourth volume. It's completely destroyed fundamental premises of Wahhabism, completely using the evidences to the extent. This is just another example of a fundamental point of view which has got no basis. So the doc going through this one hadith, we have plenty of examples of this where they rely on a point of view which has got no legs whatsoever. It's remarkable when you go into it in detail. This is me first time going through the volumes in their current form. It's remarkable how little they have to build their case. And inshallah, after this halaqah, we'll have after this series, we'll have other stuff where we'll go through hadith analysis. For example, we've got a book accounting the rulers, we've got a book on fighting oppressive rulers, which will also debunk other points of view around rebellion and things like this, which is another thing, which ultimately is their end game, which is to have a quiet ummah who's willing to put up with every kind of degradation, humiliation, and subservience, to the point that you have UAE openly allying with Israel. This is what they want for us. This is what they want for the Ummah. Also, so inshallah, stick around. Start from the beginning if you like. Somebody asked a question about the books. And the book's being revised. I mean, it's a separate publisher. We know the brothers who do it. They've put something like 10 years worth of work into it. So there are small areas which may need some rewording. I can't give you a timeline as to when they would be incorporated. What will likely happen is after we finish this series of halaqah, I'll probably discuss with them any additions and just give them my copy if I've marked off anything that requires editing. That could take some time. Ultimately, the gist of the book is still the same, and if you follow along in the halaqah, you'll get any kind of modifications on the fly anyway. And who knows, at some point in time, we can put some of the chapters through AI, so we can make it even more legible for you guys, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's call an end to the halaqah today. Next week will be 8 p.m. So new time, and by then also the times of Maghrib and Isha will merge. I was checking astronomical twilight. That starts on the 23rd of May until the 21st of June, which means even, whichever adoption you have, Maghrib and Isha are twinned by then anyway.
We discussed the issue of Jam Salah anyway, and that Salah times actually 3 and not 5 times. It's 3 times, and the Salawat are 5, and that Jam is permissible and so on. And someone, unfortunately, started collecting the hadith in that area inside Arabia. Maybe he's busy with other things, family issues and so on. But he collected a considerable amount. He contacted me. Hopefully he's hearing that accidentally or something and continue the work. And then we will have a small piece of research. Although it's a technicality really, but it's good. It refutes many false assumption and put the foundation where it belongs, to the Quran itself, and also clarify some usuli points.
All right. Anyone got any questions there's not many people in the chat, but in the Zoom, if you want to unmute, you can, but otherwise we can call it a day. Okay, no one. So next week will be page 255, chapter 6, the nature of dua. Inshallah, that should be an interesting one.
Yeah, that's for next step. So 8 o'clock next time. You take the chapter of dua. We go through it and the issues related to that and the problems. And even if Shawkani try to find a solution for the issue of dua, because they cannot deny that you can call for help or you can call for solution of problems for someone who's capable and so on. That's perfectly permissible. They say dua mas'ala, and there's a dua which you call on Allah Subhanahu or a divine being. They call it dua ibadah, and they try to make the distinction and they wave a drum. Then also again, al-Muallimi went there. You remember when we say about talab nafa ghaibi, request for ghaibi benefit is again connected to Shawkani and so on. But all will not solve anything. We'll see why it doesn't solve. Because they still insist that certain acts by themselves as acts are something like code ibadah, which is impossible. That's a fundamental error. And this is one of example. But for dua especially, it is clear that there's a dua which is not ibadah, mentioned in the Quran, many places and so on. And there's one which is dua. Which one is which? What's the distinctive mark of it? And the clear distinction, which is dictated by necessity of reason in the Quran, is that the entity you are calling for why something is believed to be divine or not. That's it. That's the only difference. All the other attempts to distinguish things based on the dua itself and the content of the dua, all of them will fail and backfire. And the one who not fail are intrinsically and fundamentally connected with the belief in the entity which is called one. Every dua is dua, masala. You call on something, you call to get something. But the question, what is not getting from whom you are calling? That's that point. But if they acknowledge that, the whole Wahhabi principle has evaporated. The whole Ibn Taymiyyah principle, the whole definition of ibadah has evaporated and finished. And we finished it in general discussion. The type is divinity first or ibadah first divinity, or the conjunction, the circularity, all of that we have expanded down. So these examples to show that the general principle applied to this will clarify things. But we go there in very nicky points, so there no doubt remains in anybody, especially for people who are simple-minded, for like this philosophical discussion, like is the concept of divinity is first and then ibadah is based on it, or ibadah is first and divinity is, or both are, one is depending upon the other, is that circular, non-circular, etc. That's deep. Many people may regard, oh, this as a stunning proof. It's absolute, yes. But most people are much more simpler than that. They need the examples of sujood, the examples of dua, and so on. Especially dua is important. That's the reason it went out. How many pages goes there? 30 pages? Yeah.
Yeah, about that. It's just under 30, 29 pages.
Yeah. Good. So that's for next time, inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Same again next week, 8 p.m. inshallah.
Okay. No more questions.
No questions.
We can proceed with the conclusion. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. وبارك على محمد وآل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. تصبحون على خير. السلام عليكم.